Welcome to Deep Drinks Podcast, where the drinks are deep and the conversations are deeper. Welcome everyone to the first episode of 2023 for the Deep Drinks Podcast. It's going to be a wild, crazy, amazing, powerful, awesome, sexy year. It's going to be awesome, and we couldn't have had a better episode to start with to learn about a religion that I know almost nothing about, Shinto. So this is going to be really good with Kaitlyn Ugoretz. But before we jump into it, I got two quick announcements. We are doing, the Deep Drinks family, we are doing dry January. So everyone knows we drink a lot on this channel. At one stage, quite often we drink almost every single weekend because I ask the guests to choose their favorite drink and to bring it along. It can be alcoholic or non-alcoholic, and usually people choose very alcoholic drinks. And for me, that because a lot of the guests are in the Northern Hemisphere, that usually makes me, it has me drinking, straight vodka or rum at 10 a.m. So it is quite, although it's acceptable to day drink in Australia, I think sometimes it's good to add some balance. So to be responsible as part of the Deep Drinks community, we're doing dry January this year. So today we're not drinking alcohol, but it's going to be all the same type of awesome conversation that we normally have. And we just make sure that if you are noticing that you're drinking too much, it is good to have a break every now and again, just to make sure you're not developing any unhealthy habits, because obviously it's very easy to do because drinking is a good time. The other thing I do want to mention is we are going to be doing some Deep Drinks panels this year. So I did a panel on hell and the history of hell in the Christendom, in the Christian denomination, in Catholicism, and where the roots of hell came from, and where and how to deconstruct the fear of hell for people who may be still struggling, even if you are a Christian or an atheist or whatever you are. How these fine folks help get over that fear and also learn about where the history of hell came from. So I did it on my main channel and it went down really well, and I thought, let's bring this to Deep Drinks. So we'll be doing Deep Drinks panels on every which concept you can think of. So look forward to that coming up this year on Deep Drinks. But before that's it for the announcements, and let's just jump straight into the interview. I need to introduce Kaitlyn Ugoretz, who's an anthropologist of religion and a PhD candidate in the Department of East Asia Languages. In the Department of East Asian Languages and Cultural Studies at UC Santa Barbara. Kaitlyn specializes in Japanese religion, globalization, technology, and media. You can read her work in the Bloomsbury Handbook of Japanese Religion, which is like a textbook that I don't have because it didn't come in time, but I have read the PDF version. I have ordered it though, and it is an awesome read. It's got many different authors. You can watch her work on the Religion for Breakfast popular Shinto series, as well as her YouTube channel, Eat, Pray, Anime. Welcome, Kaitlyn Ugoretz.
Hi, everybody. Akimashite omedetou gozaimasu. Happy New Year. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good. Very good. Very good. Thank you so much for coming on. It's a real treat to have an anthropologist of religion on Deep Drinks. You're the first. I think you're the first, at least with that title.
Thanks for having me.
So, what are we drinking today, Kaitlyn?
We are drinking genmaicha, if I'm not lagging out, hopefully.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It looks fine.
Okay, it's a little laggy on my side. So we're drinking genmaicha. A little bit of history about genmaicha. There's a lot of myths about how this tea was created. Basically, it's green tea with some brown rice that's roasted in it. There are a lot of myths about how genmaicha was created. There you go. Shout out to my favorite tea provider, Adagio. It's really good. You can get this pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, it took me 3 weeks to get it delivered from wherever it is, but that's because I live in Australia.
Oh, no.
Australia's like that, but it smells delicious, and I'm about to have my first sip. Yeah, so tell us about the history of it.
Yeah, so genmai cha, otherwise known as brown rice tea or the people's tea, is made with green tea and also roasted brown rice. Sometimes it's called popcorn tea because when you actually toast the rice, sometimes it puffs up like popcorn, but there's actually no popcorn in it. And there are a
Hmm.
lot of myths about the start of it. One of the popular ones is that there was a servant serving his samurai lord, and the servant's name was Genmai, which means brown rice. And he was pouring tea, and he was maybe stealing some rice from his employer, and a couple of the grains of rice slipped into the drink, and the samurai lord had his servant beheaded for sullying his tea. And then he decided he'd like sit down and try it out, and then he decided that he liked it.
Oh
And
no,
oh,
can't put the head back on.
probably the more historically accurate legend is that a very savvy merchant was trying to stretch an expensive supply of green tea that he had, and so they added rice kernels
Ah,
to
interesting.
tea, which gives it its like grassy notes from the green tea and like nutty flavor from the rice. It's really delicious. And so, because green tea was expensive, stretching it out using just a little bit of green tea and then more rice made it more accessible and affordable for commoners. And then this kind
Right.
of tea. They used the green tea that's harvested later in the year, which was also less expensive, and it caught on and everybody could enjoy a cup of nice tea. So nowadays people think that it's, aside from being delicious, is good for like digestive health. It's really
Oh
comforting. Drink
wow.
it with this like nutty flavor, and it's also favored by people who are fasting for religious purposes. So there's your little
So
religion scoop with
so
your
hang
tea
on. We're
today.
like what? We're like a few minutes in and you're already educating
Deep
us
dive.
hugely. Yes, this is
Cheers.
awesome. I'm loving this. This is actually delicious too.
Oh, I'm glad you
And
enjoy it.
I got it. I took my wife some special little teacups out for this,
That's
but it wasn't
gorgeous.
enough, so I got my man mug on the side here
All
as well. So I
right.
got two cups going. So
Later
that's
in the pod, I'm gonna break out this green tea flavored soda. We'll see if it's any good.
awesome.
I've never had
Awesome.
it before.
So it's actually super interesting because I think I remember hearing that prawns were the same thing, or you might call them shrimp over in the US, where
Oh, really?
they weren't seen as like a luxury thing. They were seen as
Mm-hmm.
like if something you could just get if you could, like the poor kind of drink. And it's like if this was stretching out, just trying to make tea last longer, it's like the same concept. Now it's seen as like it's expensive, like compared to just like a tea bag. So it's interesting how things change, how cultural perspectives change around things like that.
Definitely. Yeah, the kind of green tea that we're drinking now is sencha, which is actually like a nicer form of green tea.
Ah,
You
okay.
can even get it with some matcha green tea powder added in, which they never would have done, in the
Yeah.
pre-modern period when they were probably around the 1900s. So the modern period, they were drinking this.
So
The whole point was to make it cheap, and now
yeah.
it's its own cultural thing. So they make it bougie. We're drinking the bougie version of commoner's tea.
Yeah, nice. So is if do you drink at all, like alcohol
Oh
on in your
yes.
personal life? Okay.
If it
Well, I was just
wasn't dry
wondering.
January, we would have
Yeah,
been having
what would
sake.
oh, okay, awesome, awesome. I've only spent 5 days, unfortunately, in Japan. When my younger brother was living there, we went to visit him on the way through to Europe, and when we went to Europe for the first time, and we had sake, and it was very delicious. And I don't remember much more of the night. Well, I do remember it, but there was it goes from me having sake and a few other things to everyone
hmm
chanting as I was sculling a big and they're calling me Davis, 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 Davis. I'm like, I'm like, that's not my name, but yeah. So it was a good time. It was a
Sure.
good time. so
The sake was
so
powerful.
you've been pretty busy. We've been chatting back and forth on emails. What have you been up to lately before we jump into the history of Shinto?
Sure. What have I been up to lately? Well, other than being on the job market and trying to finish my dissertation, I've been working on my YouTube channel, Eat, Pray, Anime, where we talk about Japanese religion through the lens of popular culture. So, there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
My channel. Oh, my face. Yep. So I haven't come out with any videos in a couple of months. My most recent one is actually an exclusive interview with comic book illustrator extraordinaire Peach Momoko, who's been working on a wonderful series for Marvel called Demon Days. Oh, it's me.
Yeah.
So, Peach Momoko, although she's very famous, is also extremely just like humble and a little bit shy. So we talk in Japanese during this interview, and she, instead of having her face on the camera, draws us an exclusive illustration of her character from Demon Days for Marvel Comics, which was super fun.
So cool.
I have a new series that I'm working on, which is why nothing's come out recently, on shamanism and Japanese religion. So myself and a couple of my friends are putting together the videos for that. So the first video on an introduction to shamanism through the anime Shaman King should be coming out in a month or two.
Interesting. That's awesome. Sorry, I have these two books. Is this a good book for shamanism? I picked it up.
Oh, Eliade. Yeah, so he's the OG in terms of studying shamanism from an armchair religionist's perspective. Okay. So we might be critiquing Eliade a little bit on Eat, Pray, Anime. One book that I can recommend actually is Indigenous Religious Traditions in 5 Minutes.
Okay.
There's only maybe 2 articles in here, very short, 1 to 2 pages on shamanism and how it relates to Indigenous religious traditions. But my friend M. Simpson, who wrote one of the pieces on shamanism, will actually be my first guest in the series. So Eliade, he's definitely in the canon. He's one of the major scholars that introduced the concept of shamanism to the field. I didn't catch what the other book was. Maybe Dubois, who does a really good job.
This isn't shamanism, but it's something I want to talk about later. It's called In Ghostly Japan. And it's ghost stories from Japan.
Yes.
And one of them
that by Noriko Reader?
Lafcadio Hearn.
Oh, Lafcadio Hearn. Okay. Yes,
sorry.
You can definitely talk about him.
But the song, the personal karma, which is about the Penelope, I wrote it down. It's a famous play, I think, in Japan. Where did I write it? Boton Doro, Peony Lantern.
Oh, Peony okay. Lantern. Yes.
Yeah. So that thing, I read that one night, and I was like, genuinely, I was like, this is a cool story. This is spooky as F. So yeah. So let's jump into Shinto, but before we do, we have our first comment from Digital Hammurabi. Are you kidding me? Dave McDonald again. He can't substantiate the necessary ground for all instantiation for the preconditions of ultimate providing impossible impossibilities. Keep running scared, David. So he's a friend. That's Dr. Josh. He's an Assyriologist.
Hi, Dr.
Josh. He always likes to come in and just and quote Big Dog. It's an internet meme, but it's always funny to read it out.
Right.
So
Lord Almighty.
I know. So let's talk about Shinto. So what is Shinto? Give us an introduction, because so I'm a Abrahamic faith kind of boy. Like I know about Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. I know a little bit about Hinduism, like I've read the Bhagavad Gita and stuff, but when it comes, and I've read a little bit of Buddhism, but I don't know anything about Shinto. So please tell us, what is Shinto and when did it start?
I wish I could tell you what Shinto is. This is one of the deep questions of the field of Shinto studies. What is Shinto? If anybody figures out definitively what it is, please let me know. This is one of those things that scholars will go back and forth about for forever, and we can kind of unpack that later. But so my personal informed definition for Shinto is that it is a ritual tradition that originates in Japan, that is dedicated to the veneration, so the worship, for lack of a better term, of these deities called kami. So when you hear me talking about kami, I'm not referring to communists. I'm talking about Japanese deities.
So,
a lot
yeah.
of people like to comment like, "Oh, those kamis." I'm like, the Cold War's over, people. We're talking about Japan.
Well, you'd think that the Cold War's over, but there's a lot of commies popping up online at the moment. So,
Yeah. So generally, Shinto is a ritual tradition that focuses on these deities called kami. So kami are thought to live, they're immanent, so they live in the world around us. So you can find them in forces of nature like thunder and fire. There are particular kami that have kind of names and personalities. We could talk about mythology a little bit later. Even people can be kami. There are a few notable examples, such as this one kami, Tenjin, who used to be a court official and scholar in the 1100s, who died and haunted the court. And then people were just so beset by the spirit of this guy who had been exiled and then died in exile, that they decided to worship him as a deity. And even the Emperor of Japan is or has been thought to be a deity. So the kami are these deities that originate maybe in Japan, but we can talk about that a little bit more later when we talk about Buddhism.
Yeah, okay. Because I was going to, yeah. In fact, I will. I'll bring us to the Buddhism thing and bring us back. But
Sure.
just to touch on that, when Buddhism first arrived in Japan, is it true that, I think this was part of your series, because I watched a lot of stuff in preparation for this, but the series that you did with Religion for Breakfast, which was fantastic, by the way. I recommend everyone goes and watches that. So people consider there were certain clans, I think that's the right word, or groups,
yes.
or
Cool, clans. Yeah, clans.
that saw Buddhist deities as kamis, and then there were other people who said no, it's the other way around. Is that right?
Yes. So this has been a long historical conversation in Japan. So sorry, I'll start at the beginning. So you asked me when Shinto started. Let's start there, because it'll make sense.
Let's go back around. Yeah.
Sure. Cool. So it's really hard to talk about the origin of Shinto because these ritual traditions that are focused on the kami have been around since before we have records in Japan.
Right.
In sort of ancient period, right? But we only have the term, or the Chinese characters used for Shinto, used later in like the 7th century or the 8th century in Japan. And when those characters are used, scholars such as John Breen have argued that they don't actually mean Shinto as we think about it today, and that this religious tradition that we kind of think of as a semi-coherent whole doesn't really pop up until the modern period. So we can talk about kami worship and kami cults, small c, like no scare quotes cults, just like small groups of religious traditions early in Japanese history. But it becomes very difficult to talk about Shinto as a kind of united, self-identified tradition until later in Japanese history, at earliest like 1700s.
Okay.
So that being said, there were people worshiping kami when the Buddha and Buddhism, or Buddhas plural, came to Japan in the 6th century, so in the 500s. Buddhism
Okay.
comes from India, through China, through the Korean Peninsula, all the way down to Japan. And
Right.
at that point, when you have these kind of native deities meet these foreign deities, people basically said, "Oh well, these foreign deities must be similar to the ones that we have. They're just foreign kami." And then the
Mm.
Buddhists had to explain, "No, it's a little deeper than that. You know, we have this whole tradition."
Hmm.
And so this was the beginning of over 1,000 years of history of people who worship kami and Buddhists, who are often the same people,
Yeah.
um, discussing like how they could be related.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've always found it interesting that there's the argument that Buddhism isn't necessarily a religion, or the Buddha wasn't a religious
Mm.
prophet, but he was more like a philosopher, um, who gained enlightenment, whatever that means in this context, and the reason why there's, inside of Buddhism there's reincarnation and all of those things is because that was the cultural norm inside of India at the time. That's what they thought. That's what the general populace thought. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's how I've heard Buddhism be talked about. Is that similar
Mhm.
to the kami, in that there wasn't like this organized, like, this is Shinto and we follow Shinto? Of course, you mentioned that word Shinto didn't even arrive until, only 500, 300 years ago or something. But the the idea of kami worship has been around for much, much longer. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, the issue of whether Buddhism is or isn't a religion is also an issue that we see in Shinto as well. So it's important to recognize that, like, the term in English, religion, um,
Yeah.
it didn't have an equivalent in the Japanese language until the modern period. So, one episode in Japanese history that was really a turning point is in the mid 1800s, when Commodore Matthew Perry, who is an American naval officer, comes to Japan and says, "Hey, you need to open up to trade and other things, because we would like to buy and sell with you and make lots of money." And at that time, the shogun, who was the military leader of Japan, was, thinking it over. And part of the terms of the treaty that eventually was agreed upon between the American, naval officers, who rolled up in their gunships and were basically like, "Hey, we're gonna blow shit up if you're not gonna open trade to us." One of the terms of this treaty between the shogunate, the samurai government, and the American Navy was religious freedom. And suddenly, in this kind of legal and military context, the government of the archipelago that we now think of as Japan had to suddenly figure out, like, what qualifies as religion
Mm.
and what doesn't. And this question continues through the middle 1800s until 1868, when the Meiji government, which is kind of the beginnings of the modern state of Japan, we could talk about the Japanese government at that time, took over. And in their constitution in the 80s, they also had the article for religious freedom. And so suddenly, as Jason Josephson Storm in The Invention of Religion in Japan, uh, excellent book, 2011, and Julian Baraka Thomas's book, Faking Liberties, which really, dives into the issue of American and Japanese relations and the issue of religious freedom. The Japanese government had to decide what was religion and what wasn't. So at that point, we have the translation of the English term religion into Japanese, shukyo, which basically means like sectarian teachings. So the term like kyo had been applied to Buddhism previously. Buddhism in Japanese is bukkyo. The sectarian teachings are the doctrine of the Buddha. But
Hmm.
Shinto is not a cure or a doctrine. It's a do, like the Taoism, the way, or any kind of martial art tradition, like Aikido, Judo, Kendo. That do is the same, and so Shinto didn't really fit into this idea of doctrine. But it was kind of religious enough that the government had to decide whether or not it was a religion. And so at that point, the government had decided what was Shinto at this point. We can talk about Shinto in those terms. And then it kind of separated Shinto into sectarian or religious Shinto. So at this point, they're thinking of religion as a private or a personal faith. And separate from that was kind of civil rituals. So rituals that are important to the emperor and the sun goddess Amaterasu, who we'll talk about when we get to mythology. I don't want to get too deep, but basically in the
Hey, this
late
is what we do here.
1800s,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Deep
no,
drinks.
this
We're
is what we
getting
do.
deep really quick.
Yeah.
The government had to decide what was religion and what was not. Shinto was split between religious Shinto and like national patriotic Shinto. So some of it was
Okay.
religious and optional, and some of it was patriotic and like not optional. So prior to this whole debacle in the 1800s, we can't really talk about the term religion in Japan in terms of like Shinto or even Buddhism. This was a really new conversation for them. They just didn't think about these ritual traditions and deities in the same way that Western empires did.
Interesting. There's so many parallels. I'm doing a lot of research at the moment into Aboriginal Australia.
Oh yeah.
As you know, like a really old culture. I think the oldest culture in the world. And I've got this map at home, and it's like all the Aboriginal nations and language groups. I know none of them. Absolutely none of them. I know nothing about Aboriginal culture, and it is one of the oldest in the world. And it's
Amazing.
the country of which I'm born in, and it's like I know nothing about it, and I'm like, that's really sad that I know more about Greek mythology and everything else than, and
Right?
it's kind of like I think the reason is kind of what is I can kind of empathize with the Japanese people. It's like the outside world comes in, they're like, hey, we do things this way, and they're like scrambling to try and make sense of like, okay, well, how do we fit our stuff into these boxes? Like what is religion, what is ceremony, what is ritual, and having to try and fit their way of life into the outside perspective. And I think, unfortunately, for Aboriginal Australia, it hasn't gone too well because it hasn't been adopted, and I think it's a real shame. But when it comes to Shinto, is there do you see a difference between, because what you do is participant observation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you help run ceremonies and things like that over in Japan. Is there do you see a difference between the rituals that maybe someone might do for good luck or to pray to the kami as part of a tradition, or like saying grace before dinner when your family's not really religious or something, versus people who have like a deep other people have like a deep spiritual connection with this concept of Shinto, or is that not something really relevant to Shinto? I hope that the question makes sense.
No, it does. Yes. So yes, I think what I hear you saying is that there's a spectrum of sort of like cultural and just like not really civil, but like everyday rituals that people do, whether or
Hmm.
not they have deep feelings or personal investment in a particular tradition, all the way over to more personally invested in a particular
Well,
tradition.
and a great example might be like mobsters. Where's that word come from? But like the
Yakuza?
mafia, well, they'll do
Mm.
the Russian, not Russian, but like someone who may be practicing Catholic traditions like confession
Mhm.
and stuff, but they're like killing people or whatever. Like they're doing things, like they're doing rituals to help themselves, or
Mhm.
praying to certain saints and stuff, doing things, but they don't have
Mhm.
necessarily this deep internal like conviction towards their religion. They're just doing it as part of
Mm.
a tradition. Is that dichotomy in Shinto is there a dichotomy like that in Shinto, or is
Mhm.
that not even a question that's logical to ask in the concept of Shinto?
That's a really good question. Um, so like figuring out degrees of belief or like personal identification and investment in like particular ideas or spiritual powers is a very Western religious concept, right?
Mm.
So I do think that we see this spectrum throughout Japan. There are some people who will just stop by a shrine because they have something going on in their life, and who doesn't, appreciate a little, boost in luck.
Mm.
And then there are people who go to shrines, every single day and have a very personal relationship with particular kami. Um, and really feel that presence in their lives more strongly. So I think that we see this wide range of responses and investment in Shinto, from the laity, folks who aren't Shinto priests. We see that in Japan as well, because of this kind of really baggage heavy history of like the term religion and what it means to be religious, as a kind of foreign concept in Japan. Sorry if you can hear my dog.
That's okay.
Um,
We're a dog-friendly stream. My dog does it
Great.
sometimes.
When you ask people if they're religious, they tend to say no, because when they think of religion, it's kind of big R orthodoxy.
Yeah.
They think of doctrines and founders and sacred texts, which is not really something that Shinto has. But if you ask people, and these are backed up by surveys, like, do you go to shrines? Do you give offerings? Do you, pray to the deities? A lot of people will say yes, they do it once a year at New Year's, which is a very special time in Japan, or at particularly trying times in their life, at milestones, that type of thing. So when you're talking as an anthropologist, when you're talking about any, large group of people, there is a huge range in how people respond to things. So it's hard to talk about,
Mm.
Shinto as one huge thing. There's a lot of diversity. But generally speaking, because Shinto is primarily thought of as a do, as a way of living your life, as a set of customs and traditions, you do see a lot of people in Japan that participate in that and might not think of it as, religion.
Interesting. Interesting. That's very interesting. I'm not sure if I've ever shared this story on the stream, but I'll share it in the future. But part of my experience, but when I was a Christian, is I went to these Shinto shrines
Mm-hmm.
in Japan, and I noticed that people were doing certain rituals, like they were putting incense in and they were blowing the smoke on their face, or they're putting the smoke on their face as like a cleansing. I
That
think it
would
was
have
in
been a
this.
Buddhist temple.
Okay, that was outside the Asakusa temple, which is I think has Shinto connected to. I'm not sure. I'm not 100%
Mm-hmm,
sure, but
mm-hmm.
I remember for me that was a really stumbling block in my faith, because I saw these people doing something that I considered not part of like my religious worldview, and I
Mm-hmm.
looked at that and was like, and I thought to myself, like, are they really being cleansed, like, of whatever's happening? And then if they, and I grew up in a very Pentecostal, speaking in tongues, everything's demons kind of
Mm.
church. So I'm looking at it going, are they really being cleansed? And even if they weren't being cleansed or whatever's happening to them, does it matter? Like, if you could prove to them that nothing was happening, does it matter? And then I was like, what about my beliefs? And then I started questioning, like, what if,
Exactly.
so that was, for me, it was a big moment for me. I'll go into that story one time in the future, because that's a big part of my journey. But not in this podcast, but another one. But yeah, it was really interesting to see that. But I did enjoy going to there was one Shinto temple we went to in Tokyo where you wash your hands at the start. I think
Yes.
it's the really popular one near Shibuya, the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forgot what it's called, but I should have got the name for it. But yeah, it was a really good one.
There are so many of them is the tricky part, right?
Yeah.
Was it in the middle of like a big
Oh,
forest?
yeah, and it was like barrels of sake wine
Yes,
on
I
each
know
side. Yeah,
exactly which one that is
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
That's Meiji Jingu, Meiji Shrine,
yeah,
Meiji Grand
yeah.
Shrine.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
in the middle of Tokyo.
Yeah.
It's
You're
beautiful.
stunning. And you're in the middle of the city, and then all of a sudden you're like,
Yes.
bam, you feel like you're in the wilderness, and
Hmm.
it's like, it's really cool. I loved it.
That's one of my
Um,
favorite examples.
yeah. So how long has uh Shinto existed in, well, not Shinto, I guess, kami worship? How long has kami worship
Hmm.
existed? Like, when can we trace the roots of kami, of this tradition, back to, like, estimations?
Sure. Oh, okay. So this gets into archaeology, which is
Yeah.
not exactly my field. But so it's definitely kami worship is thousands of years long. The tricky part is that the written documents that we have from Japan only start in the 700s. So when you're
Right.
thinking about the ancient period, BC, there could be thousands of years of
When did
worship of things that could have been kami,
mm,
but we
when
just
did
don't
writing start
have stuff.
in Japan? I'm
When
really
did
bad with
writing
history. I'm
start?
trying to learn, but
That's a
pop quiz.
really great question. It's hard to say. So I am more familiar with the beginning of writing that's based on Chinese characters that
Oh yeah.
comes to Japan, from the Asian continent. A lot of stuff moves through the Asian continent to Japan in, the early hundreds CE.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I
So
mean,
we know that there was more writing in Japan prior to the 700s, but it's likely that a lot of it was lost in fires,
mhm,
earthquakes, or just degraded. The
yeah,
materials are natural; they're made out of wood. A lot of stuff was inscribed on bamboo slats or
yeah.
slips. And the difficult part about it, archaeology, is that stuff breaks down over time. So the
Mm.
first written works that we have are from 712 and 720 CE, which are actually kind of related to Shinto mythology. But we know that there was writing prior to that because these texts, reference things from the past, but unfortunately they're lost. So there's a lot of debate in Japan, Japanese archaeology and ancient history about when kami worship started. It was either in the Jomon period or the Yayoi period.
Ah,
So
yes.
are you a little
I
bit
don't know. I don't know.
familiar?
I don't know. I don't know when they are.
Okay.
No.
So, uh, hmm. Have you seen
Sorry.
Avatar:
It's
The
like,
Last
this is
Airbender?
like no, I haven't, but this is like,
Okay.
explain Kami to like a sixth grader. That's what you're doing right now. So like, when is that? So
Yeah.
sorry.
So, there are these two ancient civilizations in Japan. The Jomon people are thought to be like the indigenous people of Japan. The Jomon period, the period that this culture is believed to have been lived in, is from 6000 CE to 300 CE.
Wow. Okay.
I mean,
Right.
it's really hard to say anything about that period, but archaeologists
Yeah.
do their damnedest. And I'm not an archaeologist, so I'm not going to speculate about what happened during that period. But a major turning point in ancient Japanese history is when the Yayoi period starts. So the Yayoi people, again, you're, the whole audience will remember
Ah,
this,
yes.
come
Yeah.
from the continent through the Korean peninsula to
Yeah.
Japan. And mingle and displace with the Jomon people, and they bring with them wet rice agriculture. So bringing this type of agriculture is really a sea change in the history of Japan, and this is when we start to see more people coming together in villages, and then eventually the Yayoi people found a state, the Yamato court, and then from then we have a lot more historical records because the court likes to write down what they're doing, which goes back to Shinto mythology. So it's really hard to say how far back kami worship may have started with the Jomon people, but we have a lot more evidence starting in 300 BC when the Yayoi kind of take over.
Okay, interesting.
And
What
that's
I
condensing like tens of thousands of years into a nutshell. So
yeah.
go read
No,
more
and
about it.
I appreciate it, and I can see why you're interested in this because it's so diverse. And what I really appreciate about yourself and people like Dr. Josh, who was trolling in the chat before, is
Hi, Josh.
you guys always, well, he's a seriologist, PhD, and you're going to be a PhD soon, I'm sure.
Soon.
Is is um you'll always say, I'm not an expert in this area, and you'll leave it. You'll never step outside of your a kind of area of expertise, which I've noticed. You've said a few times you're not expert here, not expert here, which is really interesting because I find that that's a huge dichotomy from some of the alternative kind of histories that you kind of see online that like are like fringe ideas about like certain groups or whatever. They'll always say they know everything. Hey D, hey, it's nice to see you.
Hi,
And I
Dee.
really appreciate that you do that. You say we're not an expert in this. This is what I'm an expert in, and you try and condense 10,000 years of history into like a thing. Okay, so let me try and wrap my head around this a little bit. So, very complex. How long Shinto has existed and the worship of kami has existed. What is Shinto from like a religious perspective? So let's say you're talking to the average Australian who may not know anything about Buddhism or anything, and maybe they're a Christian or something. How does Shinto differentiate from, say, Christianity as a religion or another type of religion?
Sure. Wow, that's a big question.
This is
So,
what we do. Sorry, if any of these
how?
questions are too
Yeah,
to just pivot to something that's more reasonable because
that's okay. Um, as a Protestant Christian myself, I'm Presbyterian. This is something that I think about a lot. So some of the basic ways that Shinto is different from, let's say, Abrahamic faiths. We can talk about Western big R religion pretty clearly. So Christianity tends to be transcendentalist. There is a God that is outside of and kind of rules over the universe.
Mhm.
Let's say. Where in religious studies terms, whereas Shinto is more immanent. So the deities of Shinto are thought to kind of live around and beside the people who worship them. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the kami are tied to natural phenomenon. A kami might be thought to reside, not permanently dwell, but maybe temporarily in a really old tree or a really impressive rock. One kind of modern philosopher of Shinto, Motori Noninaga, um, he said that the kami provoke the sense of like awe or wonder that is in the natural world. That being said, kami are not all natural, so a lot of people like to boil Shinto down to a nature religion, but
Mhm.
that's not really what it is. I've had a lot of the folks who I've talked to who practice Shinto outside of Japan and might not be Japanese themselves compare Shinto to Catholicism in the fact that they're both very ritual heavy. So in
Mm.
Shinto, most of the energy is put into how to do certain rituals appropriately in order to live in harmony with these kami. So the kami have the power to either punish you if they don't like what you're doing, or to kind of bless you if you propitiate them and are grateful for their blessings. Kami are thought to have like this generative power. So, for example, people conduct rituals in Shinto for a good harvest. At the beginning of the rice planting season, at the end of it, at certain periods during the year. So, kind of cultivating this good relationship and then, the blessings that are consequent of this happy relationship with the kami is really important. Um, So there is a lot of ritual involved in Shinto. So one view of Western religion is that, they have a particular founder and a sacred text like the Bible or the Quran, and some kind of doctrine, what adherents of the religion believe. Shinto doesn't quite have any of those. You can't trace these rituals to the kami back to any one particular person. There are a variety of traditions within Shinto, from one shrine to the next, or dedicated to one god to the next. There's no sacred text, really. There are prayers that have called norito, which have been handed down through the generations, and there's mythology, but there isn't like a single text that people think there's like a sacred, you know, inspiration behind, that they need to really like memorize and live by. And in terms of doctrine, there isn't really anything, hard that you need to adhere to in order to practice Shinto. Generally, some of the concerns within Shinto are, living in harmony with the kami, and maintaining personal purity, which I can unpack a little bit if you like.
Yeah, let's unpack it. Unpack it for sure.
Sure. So you mentioned earlier that when you went to Meiji Shrine, you had to wash your hands, right?
Yeah.
When you enter under the Tori Gate, which is it's usually big and red. It's not always big. It's not always red. It's not even always wood. My next project is all about Tori Gate, so I will not go down that rabbit hole. After you enter under the Tori Gate, that's a marker of sacred space. You're entering into a pure space in which the kami reside. When you enter this space, it's thought that like you carry with you impurities from the mundane, the profane world that you're stepping in from. So you've been walking through the city all day. Maybe you went to a restaurant or whatever. And so you're coming into the sacred space. You need to purify yourself in order to be in right relationship with the kami. Purification can happen in a number of ways in Shinto. One way is through the use of water. When we get to Shinto mythology eventually, I can talk about the origins of harae. Oh, beautiful. Yes, that is Meiji Shrine.
Yeah, so this is us. I don't want to
It's gorgeous.
show too much stuff.
Maybe you have a picture of you washing your hands.
Yeah, we have one.
Lovely.
There will be one of us
you guys had
washing our hands somewhere. Yeah.
You got to take a picture. I have so many of them.
But yeah, it was.
So while you're looking for that, there's usually like a water fountain where there's the sake barrels and the wine barrels. You have to wash your hands. So using running water is one way of purifying yourself. There are two types so the opposite of purity is pollution, right? There are two types of pollution, according to Shinto thought. There's my dad.
Hey, Dad.
The first is kegare, which is I relate it to dust or dirt. It's just something that you pick up from living in the world. You don't become impure from anything wrong that you did. It's just, living in the world, you get a little dirty. When you come to talk to the gods, you need to clean up, right? Maybe you wear a button-down shirt or whatever. You got to wash your hands. So kegare is this type of just pollution that comes from living in the world. There's a second type, tsumi. Sometimes it's translated as sin, but this has a lot of, like Christian baggage to it. But basically, it comes from the violation of a taboo. So it could be a social taboo. It could be something that pisses the kami off. So it's something that you did that was improper. And in that case, that also causes pollution. And so Shinto is really focused on purifying oneself at regular intervals, as well as when you enter a sacred space, in order to talk to the kami. So that's all about purification.
Is there like certain, because I know that obviously in the Abrahamic faiths there was a lot of, especially in the Old Testament, there's a lot of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the Christian Bible. There's a lot of if you're if you've got certain physical disabilities, you can't enter the Holy of Holies. If you're I'm happy to say that your church, you mentioned before stream that your church is very LGBT friendly. But there are a lot of churches that aren't, because they reference certain scriptures. Is there anything like that in Shinto where, or is there misogyny in Shinto or anything like that, or any of these, I guess, not to be rude, but old moral ideas, I guess, from before when we had toilet paper kind of thing, like very old concepts?
I've never heard that. That's a really interesting way of demarcating time. Before we had toilet paper.
Yeah.
Yes, before we had toilet paper, disability, as well as being a woman, were considered sources of pollution, potentially.
Really?
Yes. So one source of pollution is, for example, contact with death.
Yeah.
Which anybody can have. Another source of pollution is blood.
Right.
So
menstruation.
Women priests, yes, you're ahead of me. Have to deal with this notion of, menstrual blood can be polluting, or childbirth can be polluting. My colleague Dr. Dana Marsalis is turning her dissertation into a book specifically focuses on women priests in the Shinto priesthood, and how they deal with both misogyny and also more theological ideas of pollution, because Shinto is a ritual tradition and has these kind of ritual technologies to deal with pollution. Women and other folks have found ways of purifying themselves, so that it's less of an issue. There's basically like a ritual hack for that now.
Okay, cool.
And other people don't see it so much as an issue. My friend Dr. Marsalis has talked to women who say, I don't really think that's like a contemporary thing. I don't think the kami are really worried about that. But then she'll talk to somebody else at the same shrine, and they'll have a very different view of it. So as an anthropologist, I'm very wishy-washy about what people think, because as soon as you find somebody who thinks something, you find someone else who believes the opposite, But disability and also being a woman definitely enter into these discussions of pollution and purity. Sometimes women in Japanese religious traditions, including Shinto, but also like Shugendo, which is a mountain ascetic tradition that's related to Shinto, but not. Also, there are certain like mountains or areas that women are not supposed to like enter into, because it's only for dudes.
D said God made us
gross. Yeah, we can. Would we like to? Okay, I know there was a question or two.
Yeah, let's get to there's two questions. Thanks for tuning out, guys. I know that we've had a couple of weeks off, so it's good that some of you guys have come back to say hello. So the first question is from Palmer McMath.
Hi, Palmer.
Is there any relation to, I'm not going to pronounce that, German period?
Dogu.
Okay. Okay. Can you read that question?
Yes. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hi, Palmer. Thanks for all this. Hope you could answer my question here, but is there any relation to Jomon period Dogu figurines and Shinto practice or regalia? So no, to the best of my knowledge. Dogu are not related to Shinto practice. I'm not an expert in Dogu. I'm sorry. Other than their Pokemon manifestations.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but this is.
If you Google
Dogu I recognize
Pokemon,
that. I recognize that Pokemon. I recognize that Pokemon. That's it's not a Pokemon, but I recognize the figurine. That looks that's interesting.
Yes. Wow. Okay. So Baltoy and Clay Doll, which are these two Pokemon. Sorry if you don't play Pokemon. Are related to these figurines called Dogu. I am not a specialist in Dogu, so I'm very sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure
No.
what they're for. They were definitely related to some kind of ritual tradition, but no one's entirely sure like what they were for. Even the experts, like they have their own ideas, but it's not like 100% sure. Some of the Shinto material culture, you mentioned the term regalia, that we do know pretty well of are the three imperial regalia. So there's the sword, the mirror, and the jewel. So again, when we get to Shinto mythology, maybe we should do that next. We can talk about them, but they were very quickly, they were gifts given from the imperial ancestress, the great times a million grandmother of the Japanese emperors. They were gifts, like sacred treasures that she gave to the emperor as signs of his power. So you can maybe see them in museums, but there's a lot of argument over, are they the real ones? Are they facsimiles? Does somebody have a secret real one somewhere else? It's kind of like national treasury. And these appear in anime a lot.
Okay. Dee asked, how closely is Shinto related to the Japanese imperial family?
Quite. So good question. So we've covered that a little bit. So this is where we get into some of the modern history of Shinto. So in terms of like the long tail history of Shinto, there is this myth that the Shinto deity, the goddess Amaterasu, goddess of the sun, who lives in Shinto heaven, is the great grandmother of the current Japanese emperor. So that she basically, her grandson founded the imperial family of Japan in the Yamato court that I mentioned earlier. Kind of carries that on. So these rituals to the kami that are associated with the imperial family are a part of Shinto. However, during World War II, particularly, the Americans and the British and the Allied powers in general made a lot of the relationship between Shinto and the imperial family. And the imperial family did the same thing. Again, check out Faking Liberties by Dr. Julian Baraka Thomas from the University of Pennsylvania, 2019, I think it came out. It's so good. So Shinto is related to the Japanese imperial family. However, that part of Shinto is not important for a lot of other folks who practice Shinto. So just because you practice Shinto doesn't mean you have any particular ideas about the emperor these days. But it is, like one key aspect of Shinto throughout history. That was a lot. I condensed so much there.
I feel like
I'm leaving out so much.
I feel like we need to have you on again, because I feel like I can't even. I feel like I'm not even scratching the surface at like how this topic is obviously way bigger than I initially. There's so much, like I feel so unprepared now about like I thought I was like, I did my research, but I feel so, I'm like, wow, you're blowing my mind.
All right, so let's see. If you want to learn more about the history of Shinto, and if we want to move more into like anthropology or mythology or something, then you can check out my series for Religion for Breakfast on Shinto. It's 5 episodes now. It will be 6 soon. A bonus episode will come out. And you can learn more about the historical relationship between the imperial family, the Japanese modern government, and Shinto in the 3rd video, which is called When Shinto Became a Quote Unquote Religion. And we break that down like a little bit more.
This is
that's the first series. Video.
Yeah, this is the first video, and it's a fantastic series.
So that'll give you like an overview of like, what is Shinto? When did
Yeah.
it start? What is it now? And
We
then we
needed
break
like
down. Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say we needed like we needed everyone to sit down and watch this whole series before jumping in here, so we could like have some, because I watched it and I still feel like I can't sink my teeth in. Like there's so much to learn. I
I'm
just
so
come from a
sorry.
very different.
So
No, it's not your fault. I just come from a very different, it's interesting because I come from a very different perspective with the Abrahamic faiths and not knowing much about Japanese culture and Japanese religion, obviously. But this would also
yeah, so
be a good. Sorry, go. What were you saying?
we're taught a lot about like the Abrahamic faiths and like some of the quote unquote world religions in school, right? Um, but sometimes we hear a little bit about Shinto, and sometimes we don't hear anything. So when I'm teaching folks about Shinto, and unless they're like a pretty hardcore Japanophile or they've visited some shrines, they maybe have heard of the term before, but they're not really sure like what it is. My seventh grade history teacher, which is when you usually learn about like world religions in the America, he did not do a very good job because he was on drugs. So
Oh, okay, good.
I never learned about Shinto until I got to college, really.
Oh,
And
wow.
some folks have heard about it in middle school, some folks haven't. So um, we're always kind of at a disadvantage learning about Shinto. We just don't have like the same cultural
Yeah,
on
and
ramp that we do about a
and
lot of other
and
traditions.
that's why I'm so glad to have you on, because it's always good to learn something totally outside. I feel like I can't. There's nothing to hold on to. I feel like I'm very lost, which is good.
I'm so sorry.
Um,
Yeah,
no,
focus on the
it's good.
rituals and the
It's good. It's
kami, and
good.
you'll be okay.
So I also want to promote. Obviously, you've written a few chapters, or one chapter and a co-chapter in the
Mhm.
Bloomsbury Handbook of Japanese Religion.
Yes,
I have ordered one, and it's on its way. That I've read some of the start of this book, and I've read your chapters are really good.
thank
Of
you.
course, your website as well. If you want to learn more about Kaitlyn and what she's up to, you've got links galore and everything that you're currently working on, as well as your amazing Eat Pray anime channel, which is a good one as well. I do want to touch on Shinto mythology. I want to be
Yeah.
careful of your time though, because I also want to fit in the anime tier list at some stage,
Yes.
just so we can get people fired up in the chat, because I know that everyone
Mhm.
will disagree with everyone and it'll be funny. Um,
This is
and
so dangerous. I
so
have on
let's
record our anime picks.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the uh Shinto mythology.
Mhm.
Let's touch a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap this up with a we only got through like a quarter of what I hope to get through, but and then we'll do the anime question, and then we'll finish off with some questions. So if you guys have some questions, leave them in the comments, and we'll touch on them at the end. But thank you, everyone. Let's jump into
Yes,
the
please do.
mythology and the anthropology.
Sure. Sure.
Tell
Okay.
me.
The mythology and the anthropology are two completely different things, but the
Okay.
mythology,
Okay, here we go.
I will dive less deep this time. So, Shinto mythology, when people are talking about it, they usually reference two texts. I mentioned these earlier. I didn't mention them by name, but so the Kojiki, or the Record of Ancient Matters, and the Nihon Shoki, the Chronicles of Japan, are commissioned by the Yamato court, which was established by the Yayoi people. See, now we're like cooking with steam. We know some things.
Yeah.
In the 700s and 712 for the Kojiki, 720 for the Nihon Shoki, we get these imperial histories that are written kind of in the style of China. So China had these dynastic histories, like the Book of Han from the Han Dynasty, the Book of Tang, etc. They were writing similar books themselves because they were trying to legitimate, the emperor and the court of various noble clans. And part of that legitimation was using the mythology that they had about the kami that they said that their clans descended from. So basically, the emperor and all his buddies said that they were descended from Shinto deities, the kami, even though Shinto is not an idea right now, but we'll use a shorthand. And they said, we are very powerful and special because we descend from these deities, and here are their stories. So these two documents, the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, start with the age of the gods, or the age of the kami. And they tell certain myths that were curated to legitimize their rule. So there were probably lots of other myths about different kinds of kami, but the only ones that got recorded and reproduced were these ones related to the political elites. And so we were going to talk a little bit about what is the Shinto creation myth. This is tricky because it's one story perpetuated, a few stories perpetuated by the Yamato court.
I need to stop you there, actually.
Yes.
The Shinto creation myth. Okay, so we have creation stories from many religions, and we have Islamic young Earth creationists who take it the story of Adam and Eve literally, as well as Christian young Earth creationists, things like that. Are there Shinto? Are there people who don't see it as mythology? Are there like people who see the story, or are they just accepted? Like, is there young Earth Shinto creationists, or is there?
No, not really.
Yeah, okay.
That was important to like a couple of dudes in the 1700s,
Okay.
and then was important
and then we got toilet paper.
And then we got toilet paper. And then the modern Japanese government felt that it was important to have the creation myths in their textbooks for youth to kind of support the propaganda of the state. But nowadays, and prior to all of that kind of national fomenting, it wasn't really important whether or not they were, true, or that you believed in them very strongly. But they would, they would tell the story, and it gives you kind of a handle on maybe where everything started. But where everything starts in these Shinto myths that were recorded is really nebulous, like literally. So you have these creation gods, three of them, that kind of appear out of nowhere. And then after these three creation deities, more deities just appear. And the Kojiki, for example, talks about how the land or the earth was floating in this like liquid, like oil floats on water, and that eventually kind of like these oil droplets come together and start to form the land, and it differentiates from heaven. But this is very ambiguous and amorphous. Later in the mythology, we start to get some solid ground, like literally. There are two deities, Izanagi and Izanami, he who beckons and she who beckons, which are a sister brother, wife husband duo, which we see in quite a lot of mythology. And they create the land.
Just to interject there.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Have you played Minecraft before?
I have not played Minecraft.
Oh, no,
much
this is
to
gonna
my
sound
chagrin.
this is gonna sound so cringe and nerdy now. But
Oh no, tell me about Minecraft.
When I started there's a group of villagers in Minecraft, and I bring them to my part, and they wear red, so they look to me like they look like I guess Asian, not I guess in their clothing style, I guess. So I bring them in, and I call the mother and the father, even though there is no biologies, Izukami and whatever the two words you just. I looked
Izanagi
it up.
and Izanami.
Yeah. I named that, and I named those two, and I'm like, they're the two. Then I bred all the villagers, and then that's where all the
they're like the
came from.
prototypical.
They're the two. Yeah,
father, right?
They're the mother and the father. And I made sure they stayed alive. They didn't. They died. But anyway, just thought I would tip my fedora to the conversation. Anyway, continue with the actual mythology.
Some kami in the wild, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes on with them, but long story short, they use this fancy jeweled spear. They dip it into the turbid waters of the world, and the silt that drips from the spear creates the islands of Japan. At this time, they really don't care about all of the other land. So, like in the 1700s, they were saying, oh no, like they created everything, not just Japan. But at that point, they were really only worried about the islands that, the folks live on, right? And eventually, Izanagi and Izanami create many other kami as their children, and giving birth to some very painful deities. Some fire kami. Izanami unfortunately dies, and she goes to the land of darkness, which is called Yomi. Sometimes called Shinto hell, but it's not really hell. And so then you kind of get an Orpheus and Eurydice type story where Izanagi goes to the land of Yomi to ask the kami that are kind of lording over Yomi if he can have his wife back. And it's really dark in there. And Izanami says, I'll go ask them. You stay here. Don't try to look at me. And what does he do? He tries to look at her. So he strikes a match, basically, and sees that she's like kind of a zombie. She's a corpse. She's rotting. She's infested with maggots. And he has kind of shamed her. And so she chases him out of the land of Yomi. There's more stuff that happens because he's come into contact with pollution. He needs to purify himself. And so he goes to a river, flowing water, and performs misogi, which is how you purify yourself with water. And out of this divine act of purification, he creates 3 really important deities in the Shinto pantheon. Amaterasu, the sun goddess, the ancestress of the imperial line in Japan. Susanoo, which is a kind of a god of like storms, that's up for debate. And Tsukiyomi, who's kind of the god of the moon. And so from this act of purification, we get the sun goddess, and then because she's the ancestor of the imperial line who commissioned this book, 2 books about the mythology, the rest of the mythology kind of focuses on her and her descendants. I'm gonna stop there because there's a lot more.
That is amazing. That the zombie part, that's creepy. I love creepy, and I
have a video about that through the lens of Naruto. So if anybody want 2 of them. So if you want to learn about Izanami and Izanagi, and then Amaterasu, Susanoo, and Tsukiyomi, these are my 2 first videos. You will see me looking like a deer in the headlights in this very kitchen before I had a production value. But yeah, we'll talk about Naruto. There's me in the middle of the pandemic.
Okay. Cool.
You can learn more.
That's awesome. And I will be doing that. I'll be definitely learning that, because I haven't watched Naruto, so I didn't watch that episode, but I've watched Spirited Away, so I watched that episode that you did, or Miyazaki.
Nice.
So what is that part of a holy text that someone can read, or a part of or like where can someone find that story? Where do like or are you combining a bunch of different sources, or is there like because I think because I first reached out to you, I think in 2000. I don't know. It was on Facebook, and I reached out and I said, "Hey, I saw you on Religion for Breakfast. Can you recommend a Shinto text I can read?" And you're like, "Kind of, like kind of."
Sorry, my answer is always kind of.
Yeah, that's okay.
Scholarly habit. Yeah. So you can read these myths. So the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki. The Kojiki is easier to get your hands on. So there are 3 translations. People argue about which is the best one. Some of them translate the names of the kami, which a lot of folks find really confusing. So like the sun goddess, Amaterasu, if you translate it, it's like shining heaven person. And so if you want to keep reading like, and then shining heaven person said to rushing raging man, blah, blah, blah. Even me, like I've been studying Shinto for a decade, right? I'm like, who are we talking about? So it's a little tricky. You can read one translation of the Kojiki for free on sacred-text.org. They have the translation by Basil Hall Chamberlain up there. There's a more recent one by Gustav Helt, but he translates the names. So that's a little tricky. But then the rest of the translation is a lot more readable than some of like the ye olden translations.
Yeah.
So if you
Okay.
want to read it for free on the internet, here you go. This is it.
Awesome.
1919. Yeah.
Wow. Awesome. Okay. Well, that's good. So let's, because we're running very quickly out of time, and there's so much more I wanted to cover,
Yes.
but that's okay.
I can stay for a little longer if you like. But
Okay.
if you've got, you want to go eat lunch,
I mean,
that's
no,
also
it'll be
fine.
like we could be here all day. I think
we would be. Yeah, let's not
what
do
we'll do,
that.
if when you're a famous professor, you're gonna have to come back on.
Sure.
And
Hopefully next year.
and yeah, well, yeah, hopefully next year. But let's jump into the anime stuff.
Yeah.
Because
Let's do
we
it.
will be I'd be in very big trouble if I didn't do the anime stuff. So
You gotta do it.
okay. So now keep in mind, I don't know any really much of these animes, but I asked my younger brother to create a tier list of 25 animes.
Yes.
And he said, what do you want? And like, he had a million questions. So I was like, I don't know, things that are popular, things that are cringe, things that aren't cringe. Like, just give me a broad spectrum. So let's do this. So I'll add this to the stream, and I hope you can see that pretty well.
I can, yeah, pretty well.
Okay, cool. Okay.
If you can tell me the titles though,
okay,
when we get to them, that would be helpful.
Awesome. So what we'll do is, are you familiar with a tier list?
Yes.
Okay, so S is the best, D is the worst. So I might get these names wrong as well, but he wrote them down for me. Clannad After Story.
So, question: are we ranking these in terms of personal preference or like Shintoiness?
let's rate personal preference, yeah. But
okay.
you can give it bonus points for whatever you want. But let's go. This is your tier list. What you think?
Ooh.
You think are good animes, and you have to. You see, one of my favorite books is Ready Player One, right?
I love Ready Player One. Yeah.
But when I reread it now, because that was the book that got me into books, but when I reread it now, I'm like, oh man, this was so juvenile compared to what I like. I still like it, but it's a little bit embarrassing when I'm as well, because it's like, it's one of my favorite books. But so you have to take all things into account. So although you might find some of these cringy now, yeah, okay. So Clannad After Story.
Yeah, I've never read Clannad or watched it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm afraid I'm gonna not.
If you haven't, there's so many animes. But if you haven't seen it, that's cool. We just won't put it on. Kill la Kill.
Kill la Kill. I like Kill la Kill. A. I feel like that's A range.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Do you have any
Dragon Ball Z.
Ooh, not. I've never watched it. I'm like the OG Pokemon generation. I was born in 94. So when I got to the period where Dragon Ball Z was popular, boys were annoying and gross. So I naturally dislike Dragon Ball Z, but it's not anything related to the actual series. But I'm going to give it a D. Okay. Sorry, guys.
Okay. That's cool. My Dress Up Darling.
Oh, I've never even heard of that one.
Okay. I hope he hasn't thrown in some like really messed up like hentai or something in there. Spy X Family.
Oh yeah, S. That's a good one.
S. Okay.
10 out of 10 recommend.
This is giving me
doesn't have anything to do with Shinto.
Okay, that's okay.
Season 2's coming out. It's great. Love it.
Okay, awesome. This will give me a good understanding of where I should start, because I'm not a huge anime watcher myself, but
I will say that I love anime. I watch a fair amount, but being a PhD student, I don't have a lot of free time. So a lot of this I watched in like middle school, high school, college. I'm a little out of date. Saz.
No, I get the vibe that you're quite busy. When we were talking, you're like, well, I'm in this country here, I'm doing this, and like you'll just travel. You're like, in this month I'll be in this state. I'm like,
perpetually
oh my
unavailable.
Yeah.
What's next?
Once again, thank you so much. Kimi ni
sure.
Todoki.
Todoke, I love Kimi ni Todoke. I am an unapologetic shoujo fan. I'm gonna give that an S because
Is that this one here?
everybody needs some like wholesome, shy people, live their lives and are happy energy.
Is that one up the top there that I put there?
I can't really see, but let's see. I don't think so. That looks like Chainsaw Man.
Okay, is it this one?
There you go. That I recognize
cool.
that. That's
okay, cool.
That's Kimi ni Todoke. It's very cute.
Okay, Chainsaw Man.
Slow burn shoujo. Oh, Chainsaw Man is really good. Yeah, I would put that as an S.
Oh wow, I'm getting a lot of S's.
All right. I either love something or I've never seen it.
Yeah, I hate it. Steins Gate.
Oh, I've never seen that one, but I've heard like really good things. So I'm gonna give that like a B. It's probably like an A if I have seen it, but I have not.
Okay. Orimo. He wrote or no imoto ga konami kawaii wake ga nai. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Okay. I'll probably spell it wrong. The melancholy of Haruhi
Suzumiya.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's definitely S tier. That is a classic. It's a slow burn, but then once you get into it, you're like, what the hell is happening? It's
okay. I hope I got that one up there. Cowboy
Yes,
Bebop.
that's correct. Oh, yeah, S tier.
Okay.
Love it.
Is that
I liked the Netflix series. People can at me.
Is this
but
is that Cowboy Bebop? Oh yeah, it is.
Well,
yeah, it is.
it is. Okay, I saw Faye.
Sorry.
Yes, Cowboy Bebop is amazing. Shinichiro Watanabe is a genius. He also did Samurai Champloo. 10 out of 10 recommend.
Okay. XXX Holic.
Oh, I feel bad making everything S tier, but XXX Holic is amazing.
Okay, S tier.
Yes.
I think that's
Clamp.
that one.
Clamp is wonderful. The original multiverse.
Usagi Drop. Bunny Drop.
Ooh, I've never seen that one.
Okay. Cool.
It looks cute. Make it a C.
Okay. Attack on Titan.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm gonna give that one an A.
Okay.
It's like good, but it's
okay.
It's not
That's
like
one I've heard of. That's one I've heard of.
Yeah. Oh, that one's really, really popular.
Sword Art Online. This is one I've seen.
Oh yeah.
So this would be interesting where you put this. I've seen like a few episodes.
Okay, a few episodes. Like based on season 1, it's an A. Based on what came after, it's like a B.
Okay. Well, I didn't like it because it jumped around it jumped around too much. I wanted to see the journey, and I just felt like it was like 3 months later.
It was very slice of life, and if that's like not your genre, then it's gonna be kind of confusing.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
So I haven't seen it. My sister loves it. I don't get it. I'm gonna give it a B because I feel like if I don't, people will hate me.
Okay. Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann.
Oh, Gurren Lagann. I've never seen that one either.
Pronunciation.
That's okay. That one's very popular. I feel like B.
Okay.
I've seen a couple episodes, I think, like a long time ago. It was like nice.
Sakura Trick.
Oh, I've never seen that one.
Okay, let's leave it out.
Sure.
Golden Boy.
Golden Boy?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I've never heard of that one. I thought it might be Golden Kamui.
Okay.
Just different and very Shinto-y, maybe.
Fruits Basket.
Fruits Basket. I love that one. That one could be S tier. I love it. Okay. Yeah. That was, I think, one of my first anime, like that. Yeah. Well, not first, but it's really good. I'm a fan.
Okay, cool. Oh my gosh. Bakemonogatari.
Oh, Bakemonogatari. B.
B, okay. K-On.
Oh, I've never seen K-On, but it's very popular.
Okay. FLCL, Fully Cooley.
Oh, I haven't seen that one either. Well, I haven't seen it all the way through, but it's visually stunning. Yeah. C. I'll put like C
Okay.
for it is a known quantity, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. Mob Psycho 100%.
I haven't seen that one either. But
That's
it
okay.
reminds me of Psychopaths, which is like an A.
You're a PhD student candidate, so yeah. There's no reason that you
If
should.
I have to watch some anime, it's usually Shinto ones.
Okay.
Because then I can call it work.
Okay, awesome.
Oh,
Made
that looks
in
like Gundam.
Made in Abyss.
Oh, it's not Gundam.
Oh,
So tiny.
maybe I'll skip one. Is
Oh,
there
oh,
Made
oh,
in
oh,
Abyss?
oh. I've never seen that one either. But the next
Okay.
one's Gundam, right?
Yeah, Mobile Suit Gundam.
Okay, so that was probably my first ever anime. I think I saw that prior to Pokemon. There are so many of it that I haven't like seen them all, but I saw Mobile Suit Gundam, and I'm gonna give that an A for nostalgia.
Oh, awesome. Okay. All right, here we go. This is where I think
Oh,
Sailor Moon. This is where I think.
yeah. Okay, at me next time. I remember vividly, like I would come back from elementary school and like kick my dad off the TV and watch Hamtaro and then Sailor Moon. So
Fighting
Sailor Moon
evil
is
by
definitely
moonlight.
like, right?
Yeah.
You just, yeah. But I'm gonna give it an A.
Okay, that's fair. Death Note, everyone's favorite.
Oh, I did enjoy Death Note, except for the Netflix one, but it's not like my fave, so I'm gonna give that a B.
Okay.
And I'm
Uh,
gonna give Full Metal Alchemist a B.
oh,
People
you already
are
knew
like
what that
super
was.
into it, and but like
Demon Slayer.
it's fun. Oh yeah, that's like S tier. Demon Slayer, big
Okay,
fan. There's some Shinto, so there we go.
you're is Demon Slayer got Shinto in it?
It's got some Shinto in there, yeah.
Okay, great. So you're the second person to recommend Demon Slayer, I think.
Oh yeah,
I
it's
think.
an
So I think I'm
international
gonna.
phenomenon. Check it out.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check out Demon Slayer. That sounds cool. Okay, well, hang on. Let's add that. So that's pretty good. I think you've done pretty well. It looks like you're definitely an anime fan because most of these are S tier. If you could, what's your favorite Studio Ghibli film?
Ooh, Princess Mononoke is my favorite.
Yeah,
Um,
that's got a lot of
it's
Kami
got a
stuff
lot of
in it, right?
Kami in it,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And it's like a little darker. It's a little more sophisticated than Spirited Away. But
Mm.
I love both of them and Totoro.
Yeah.
And pretty
Yeah.
much all of the other ones. But yeah,
Spirit.
Princess Mononoke is my favorite. A few that you didn't have on there, I would recommend uh, Makoto Shinkai's two most recent films, Your Name, Kimi no Nawa, very Shinto-y, and then Weathering with You, which is also very Shinto-y. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Cool.
he's kind of the new Hayao Miyazaki.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting. Wow. Oh, that's big. Is he still making films?
Miyazaki?
Yeah.
Well, yes. He keeps like retiring and then doing more stuff because
Yeah,
he
I
gets
heard.
bored.
Yeah.
So, I heard that he's working on something now and then he promises he'll retire, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. Well, okay, so we've gone through a huge like kind of crash course into Shinto. So many more questions I'd love to get to you with, and I might just drop them in with some of the audience questions. But I really wanted to touch on the religiosity of Japan as well as the influence of Shinto, which is really arguably your expertise. So
Mhm.
I'll ask a few of those questions, but it might be good to jump into the Q&A from the audience. So we had D who
Yeah,
said,
let's do it.
is there ancestor worship in Shinto?
Yes, there is ancestor worship in Shinto. Um However, a lot of the ancestor worship today is kind of rooted through Buddhist ritual tradition rather than Shinto tradition. Shinto tends to focus on like this worldly life that we're in now, And then after that, Buddhism kind of takes over. But there are Shinto traditions for folks after they die. And some kami are also ancestral as well. So yes, ancestor worship is part of Shinto, but I wouldn't say that Shinto is ancestor worship the same way I wouldn't say it is nature religion. But those are two components that make up Shinto. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was in the series that you did. It's the old saying: people in Japan are born Shinto and die Buddhist. Yeah,
That's
interesting.
generally true today. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the answer there. Interesting. There isn't any obvious connection. I was wondering that since masquerade is shown on Dogu figurines, perhaps there was an influence on later rites.
Oh, sure. Masquerade?
Masquerade.
I'm not quite sure. But I'd love to look into that more. So feel free to email me.
Yes, please give Kaitlyn more homework. How did Buddhism affect the Shinto religion? Or didn't it?
A lot. So a short answer is check out the video that I did for Religion for Breakfast about, what's the history of Buddhism and Shinto. It's an over 1,000 year long relationship between Buddhism and Shinto. So when Buddhism came in, as we mentioned in the 6th century, that kind of started a conversation where they were like, okay, we have these deities from outside. We have the deities that we already worship here. What's their relationship? And lots of people had lots of answers for that over time. And sometimes people said, oh, well, Buddhas are just foreign kami. And then later people said kami are just manifestations of the Buddhas. And then they went back and said, no, the Buddhas are actually kami, like the kami started, and then they went everywhere else, and then it came back as the Buddhas. So there's kind of been a fight for supremacy. But historically speaking, Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines were very related. In fact, a lot of times they were on the same ground. So we would call them temple shrine complexes. And so Buddhist priests might be, or monks might be performing rituals for the kami. Shinto priests might be, doing stuff related to the Buddha. This is why there was a lot of syncretism between Buddhism and Shinto. And that's the short answer.
Okay.
So yes, it affected Shinto. Shinto affected Buddhism. There's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that they seem to commingle so well. Like you'd never, I don't know, you might actually, but you'd never really see like a mosque and a synagogue next to each other, like sharing the same complex where, or maybe you do.
Well,
maybe
yeah.
Not. but you do see that within Shinto and Buddhism. It's like,
yes, we have seen that historically. In the Meiji period, which I mentioned earlier, so basically like in the middle 1800s, the government made a law that the Buddhist temples and the Shinto shrines had to be separated. So that separation was very violent because they had been commingling for so long. And actually it led to a lot of violence against Buddhist temples and monks, and they burned things down, and they melted bells to make guns and stuff like that. And there was also a lot of fighting between Buddhist monks and Shinto priests historically, and I'm not gonna get too far into that. So it's always been kind of a tense relationship between Buddhism and Shinto, but they have been interrelated, and there isn't an exclusionary relationship between them. You can do Shinto and Buddhist things.
interesting.
Yeah. Short answer.
I'm going to get you to read this question because I'm going to pronounce everything wrong.
Okay, that's fine. So, P asks, Amaterasu as Dainichi Nyorai, which is the solar Buddha. What does that speak on Shinto's ability of assimilation, at least before the Meiji era, before state Shinto came along? Thanks. Yeah, okay, so this is a really complex question. I do talk about this a little, well, Andrew Mark Henry, who's the host of Religion for Breakfast, talks about this using my words in several of the videos. So yes, Amaterasu, the Shinto kami, was related to or said to be like a manifestation or an avatar of the solar Buddha, Dainichi Nyorai. So this is part of the syncretism between Buddhism and Shinto. There was this idea in Japanese Buddhism called Honji Suijaku, which means the roots and the traces. So basically, there was a very fairly dominant idea in medieval Japan that the kami were actually the local manifestation of Buddhas from elsewhere. And so they said, oh, well, Amaterasu is a sun deity. She's an avatar or a manifestation of the solar Buddha. This was a very popular idea at some really important Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines. We even see this idea at Ise, which is a complex of shrines that are dedicated to Amaterasu and other really important deities. But the inner shrine of Ise is like the main shrine of Amaterasu. We even see this idea of Dainichi Nyorai there. So what does that speak on Shinto's ability of assimilation? Priests, like Buddhists, and if we can call them Shintoists during the medieval period, although that's really debatable, had a lot of different ideas about how they were interrelated. There was kind of a reverse movement, a reverse Honji Suijaku, where some people said, actually, Amaterasu is the start, and, the solar Buddha is the manifestation of her elsewhere. So there's like a lot of power plays. So I wouldn't say it's assimilation, but it's what my colleague and advisor, Fabio Rambelli, calls a combinatory paradigm. So they're combined in different ways, and there's kind of like a push and pull back and forth between different ideas prior to state Shinto. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. We've been talking so much history. I promise I'm an anthropologist.
So good. This is so good. This is such a good, I guess, jumping off point for a lot of people, because they'll hear something that catches their attention and they're like, what is that? And then like it's a giant trip to Wikipedia and then hopefully to some books to find out more, and to your series, of course.
Yes, if anybody would like to learn details, send me a message. I'll give you a book recommendation.
Awesome. How does Shinto deal with morality?
Oh,
as opposed to other religions, yeah.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about purity and pollution, and how certain acts that are like against social norms, or against the norms of the kami as well, when those are violated, bad things happen. So you could kind of talk about that in terms of morality. But generally speaking, Shinto doesn't have like a code of morals that you must follow. There's no like 10 commandments. There's no like people are innately good or evil or anything. It's really just about like ritual relationships with the kami, and depending on how those go, good things or bad things can happen. Bad things can happen to good people. Good things can happen to bad people. So there isn't really like a moral doctrine involved with Shinto. But Shinto priests will tell you, like, don't be a jerk. Try to be harmonious.
Yeah.
Don't kill people. That's a taboo.
So this is a question I always get asked, since if I'm having conversations with my religious friends, is they say, where do you get your morality from? Because I'm no longer a Christian.
Yeah.
Where does a Shinto priest get their morality from? Is there like cultural norms, or have they got other belief systems, or is all of Japan utilitarian, or like what? How does like how?
I mean, there are some ideas of morality baked into Shinto traditions that have kind of come through the
Mm,
centuries. Even Shinto mythology, we talked about Izanagi and Izanami. Before they have children, there's this moment where they're trying to decide how they relate to each other. Izanami, the woman, speaks first, and then they have a disfigured child. So then they decide, oh, the man needs to speak first, and then they have uh, an able child, and they decide that's good. So you can pull moral
mm,
lessons out of some of this stuff. Living in harmony with nature. Not killing people is like an actual taboo in Shinto, for example. You can pull morality out of that, but I would say that most of the morality of Shinto priests and other folks in Japan comes from, social norms, or from Buddhism has more, doctrine that explicitly tells you, like, you should do this, you should not do that, or this is
mm.
the way that you should live your life. So yeah, Shinto's not too overly concerned with morality.
Yeah, this is what I was hoping and also fearing, is that a lot of the presuppositions that I would go into this conversation with wouldn't necessarily be
Mm-hmm.
relevant. It's like I'm not even I I'm not even it's hard because it's like I'm not even asking the right questions. Like it's you need to think very differently about
You
the
do.
cosmos
That's
and
why it's so
stuff.
fun
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
my
and
in
that's
my
why it's
experience.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, most of the questions that we come, equipped with, like, all right, I'll, ask these five, like, who's
Mm.
the founder? When did it start?
Yeah.
A lot of the times I'm just like, I don't know. Nobody knows. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a lot of room
It just
for
just like the gods, they just
study.
appeared. It just appeared. Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
Take it as
this is
read.
a this is a question that I really wanted to know about. Are there Shinto superstitions, concepts, or ideas that are prevalent in modern Western culture that have like maybe trickled in?
In modern Western culture. Okay, so I have to do the religious studies scholarly
Yeah,
thing
the
to say
preamble.
that
Yeah, yeah.
I'll keep it short, I promise.
No, no.
So
Good, good.
superstition is often set apart from religion, in that, like, religion is this codified thing that society has agreed upon is like an okay tradition, right? More or
Hmm.
less. Um,
Yep.
Superstition is somehow like bad and anti-modern and like a holdover from ancient times that we should like get rid of. This is kind of like baked into conceptions of modernity, uh, and what it means to be like a modern civilization. So there's a lot of baggage with the term superstition, right?
Yep.
Sorry, all words are bad. That being said, um, there's not really a lot of superstition that or ideas about things that will happen that
Like
have come
luck.
over from Shinto. Yeah, I mean, when you go to a Shinto, like if you're a tourist and you go to a Shinto shrine, you might pick up an omamori, which is like a protective amulet that you're supposed to carry on your person. I have one in my backpack. Actually, I have a few in my backpack. People keep giving them to me. They're really fun to collect. Um,
It's like we
so
had the
some
Pokemon era, like you
people,
were saying.
yeah, gotta catch them
Yeah.
all.
Oh yeah.
Omamori.
Yeah.
Definitely. I have a video about omamori if anybody wants to learn more about those. But people don't tend to hear about Shinto much at all in the
Mm,
West. I think what we hear about more is yokai, or these like supernatural creatures that are sometimes related to Shinto and
yeah.
sometimes are just part of like Japanese folklore. So you might hear about like fox spirits or raccoon dogs called tanuki. They're not actually raccoons and they're not actually dogs, but that's how we translate tanuki. So you might hear about some of those, but no, I don't think a lot of superstition has come over from Japan. But I hope people learn more about yokai and Shinto. And I'm always surprised by like what people pick up from anime. So maybe more is coming over.
Okay. I got I someone suggested I grab this book, Yokai Attack.
Oh
And
yeah,
with
yokai attack
Japanese
is
monsters. But
really fun. Hiroko
Yeah.
Yoda and Matt all are fantastic. I would also recommend the yokai books by Zach Davison.
Okay.
He's a friend of mine. He's a folklore expert, comic book geek, writer. He
What was his name?
actually
Sorry,
wrote Zach
Davison. Zach
Davison.
Davison.
He actually writes Demon Days with Peach Momoko. I've been chronicling their series, so if you want to learn more about yokai and Zach Davison's work, check out my videos about Demon Days. Now they have a second series I haven't made the videos yet for, called Demon Wars. That's more fun. Yes, Zach Davison has written several books about yokai. There's one about Yurei. There's one about like cat spirits. He's done a lot. He's also
Wow.
worked on Star Wars. I mean, what doesn't he do? He's also a translator. He's worked on Gegege no Kitaro, like spooky Kitaro is a very popular manga and anime that he has translated. And then like kind of the OG yokai scholar who you can read is Michael Dylan Foster.
Okay.
There's more. There's like a bunch of people about yokai, but that's a good place to start.
If you do have a reading list on your website or something, I'll post it in the chat down below so people can get those.
Oh yeah, I did have a Goodreads. I've kind of fallen off with updating it, but
I'm the one who suggested you get the Goodreads years ago. I was like,
that was you, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Years ago.
I was like,
yeah,
please, I need to know what you're
you.
reading. Yeah.
I will update it at some point. I can't tell you when. But the videos that I have about yokai so far also have reading lists in the video description. So check that out.
Cool. All right, awesome. Okay, will do. So let's wrap up the interview with two of the questions I always ask most of the guests, unless it's inappropriate. First one is, because we talk a lot about religion, and obviously you're a Presbyterian, but you also study Shinto. What is the most plausibly true religion that you don't believe in?
Oh, that's hard.
It's a hard one, right? Because
the most plausibly true religion that you don't believe in. I feel like I have to say Shinto. I feel like you can practice Shinto and do no harm and live pretty chill, but also Buddhism.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So maybe that Shinto Buddhism syncretism is pretty all right.
I do like I'm not sure if this is mainstream, but I do like the Buddhist concept of hell, which is that if you go to hell, it's like it's a temporary place to burn off your karma if you didn't do it.
Yes.
And then you go back to enlightenment. You get enlightened after it, but it's like
you can get out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a nice kind of hell.
I have some videos on several. There are many Buddhist hells. I have some videos about some of them coming up.
Oh, wow! Your channel is gonna blow up. It's gonna be awesome. Keep producing content
when I find time.
When you have time. Yeah. So, last question: if you could choose a religion's afterlife, and then afterlife would immediately become true, what would you choose? As an anthropologist.
As an anthropologist? I don't know. I'm like really attached to Christian heaven personally.
Yeah. No, I get it.
But the Pure Land, in terms of like Pure Land Buddhism, seems like pretty good. So
is that better than, I don't even know about what that is. What is Pure
about
Land?
like non-existence? Oh, that's a rabbit hole that we don't have time to go over.
Okay. Next time. We'll do that next time, or if you got time to come on once again, you're always welcome. It's been a lovely conversation, but thanks. I just want to shout out your stuff once again. Everyone go check out Eat, Pray, Anime, and check out the videos. I mean, you got like so many videos, and you got so many coming up, and you put a lot of work into them. I can tell. They're not just you rambling. You've actually edited them, and there's like scripts to them, things like that. So everyone go check out Eat, Pray, Anime. Fantastic. And also next week we have Seth Andrews, the Thinking Atheist, on becoming deconverted, his journey deconstructing his faith. He said he was a Fox News Christian. I don't know what that is, but we'll be finding out. So that'll be an interesting episode. And is there anything else you wanted to mention, Kaitlyn, before we wrap up? Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. No, not really. If you'd like to hear more, because we could talk for 100 years. And then we would need to go to the Pure Land and then reincarnate and then talk some more. Check out my YouTube channel, Eat, Pray, Anime. Like and subscribe for notifications when new videos come out. I promise they are incoming. My next series is an introduction to shamanism and Japanese religion. So talking about the scholarly study of shamanism and then looking at some specific types of people who have been called shamans in Japanese religions, with experts that are not me on those particular topics. So stay tuned for more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And we'll see you guys next time. See you guys next week. See you guys. Love you all. Bye.